Well, hello. Thank you so much for tuning in, watching, listening, whatever you're doing to engage with us here. My name is Alex DeRosa. I'm our lead pastor here at New Life. And with me is Pastor Chris, our founding pastor. And today we're going to conclude our three-part series on submission, which is piggybacking off our message about submission as well. And I wanted to get into the reality that so many have to engage with when it comes to church leadership, unfortunately. And it's when some church leaders abuse their power and force people to submit for a variety of reasons. Unfortunately, I've had friends and family that have left the church because a leader took their position and abused it by yelling at someone or cussing someone out, or just making a choice that wasn't aligned with God, and someone walked away. And now in leadership, we know that we're all we're all fallen humans, and that me messing up my words there proves the point. But we all mess up. We screw up, and so I know that, like, hey, I'm gonna mess up, and I've messed up before. I'm gonna mess up again. But my goal is to not, and to be as much like Jesus. But what we want to maybe address is people who aren't just doing that because they mess up, but are really abusing their power. And how do you engage with that? What do you do if you find yourself in this situation, and kind of why that has happened before? I know it's a big trail. One thing before I swing it over to Pastor Chris, I was on a video game years ago. It was actually a board game implementation online, which is basically a video game. And I was talking to someone, and my name on this server is Pastor A-Rod. So everyone knows I'm a pastor. And one of the guys that I was playing this game with, it was just a light card game, and he kept making fun of me. And every time I'd mess up, he'd make fun of me and call me names. And I was like, this is weird. And so I said, hey, do you have a problem with me? He said, yeah, I have a problem with you because you're a pastor. I said, why do you have a problem with me? Because I'm a pastor. And he said, because my friends growing up were molested by a priest. And I said, oh my goodness. And I said immediately, like, I am so sorry. Like, that should never have happened. He said, yeah, so you're in the same boat in my mind. And I said, well, I'm really sorry to hear that. But I will tell you this, that pastor was not doing the Lord's will, that priest was not doing what God wanted him to do, that he was absolutely wrong. And I don't think he should have been in that position because of what he was doing. And so I'm going to say that I love you, and I know God loves you, and what happened to your friends was not his will or what I would condone ever. No. And he said, oh, that was a different response than I thought I was going to get, because I've been mean to you for about an hour. And I said, well, I understand you're hurt, and that's not the will of God. So I get it. Oh man. And like, that stuff fires me up. Like, right. My wife will tell me whenever scandals come up, and I get so mad that I'm like, I can't talk to you about this right now, because I get so frustrated, because I get the hurt that people have and the responsibility that we have. How have you seen that? And like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, every day when I wake up, almost, I think of Hebrews 13, which says, obey your leaders in the Lord, for they will watch over you as those who will give an account. And I take that seriously. I'm a retired pastor, but I still have pastoral functions. Yes. And anytime I am representing Jesus, I have that in my mind. And that means, well, I was your pastor before you took the lead pastor job. Now you're my pastor. But anyway, I really believe everybody's going to stand in front of Jesus.
Yes.
But I believe that I'm going to stand in front of Jesus for myself, and then he's going to have a long list of people that I've pastored, and it's thousands of people. Yeah. And he's going to go down the list. And unfortunately, I'm not going to remember everybody's name, but he's going to say, how did you do at making Alex a better Christian, better able to serve me, better able to reflect me? And I take that very seriously. And like you said, we're human. Yeah. We make mistakes. When we make mistakes, we should admit it. That's the first thing. If I ever have made a mistake to any of you, and I haven't told you I'm sorry, that's an unusual case, because usually if I find out that I am wrong, I come to you and I say, look, I was wrong. I'm apologizing. Yeah. I've already apologized to God. I need your forgiveness too. And I try to make that right, because what you said, it's bad enough when anybody sins. Yeah. But when a church leader sins, it's almost Well, it is worse because I was responsible for them, whoever I offended, and then I offended. Now, let me say, I might have offended you because of the gospel. That's not
That's
what
a
I'm
different
talking
thing,
about. I have a right. I have a right to do that.
Yes.
I have a responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
But if I say something offhand, just offhanded remark, and it offends you, then you should tell me, and that's on you to tell me you've offended me, because but leaving the church or you have a right to leave the church if you come to me and I hear your story and I don't do anything about it. But a lot of times I've become a better pastor because somebody has come to me and said something I've done wrong, and I went, wow, I didn't even know I did it, first of all. Or I did know I did it, and I didn't think about how it came across.
Yeah.
And you said we're humans. We're and I always used to say, I'm a Chris. There's no T at the end of my name.
Yeah.
And everybody knows what that means. I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. And every time some famous pastor falls, I don't feel like gloat about that. Oh, look, I'm just this little guy in this little town of Saxonburg, and I'm better than him. No, I feel sad because of all the people that are going to be like your friend on the game.
Yep.
That they think they could put us all in the same basket. And that's true if you're in New Life too. Everybody should be sorrowful when a pastor falls.
Yep.
Everybody should, and if I have any connection with that pastor, I'm going to go to him and I'm gonna say one thing. I'll say you were wrong.
Yes.
And tell him, call him out on it. And if he says you're right, that's one thing. If he says, hey, look, you're just a pastor of a little church in Saxonburg, and then I am going to have the approach that you had. I'm going to say, wow, you're wrong, and I'm sorry that you're not taking correction. And I might have to break fellowship with him because I can't be associated with that person if there's no correction.
Yeah, that's why there's so much weight on the leadership that we're called to. It's why in God's word it says not many should seek to be teachers of the word, because there's going to be a judgment on that. It's why Jesus said, if you're leading someone astray, it's like putting a millstone around your neck. You might as well put a millstone around your neck and be thrown into the water. And if you don't know what a millstone is, it's like a concrete circle that could fit around someone's head if you'd want to, and you're not getting out of that. If you go into the water, you're done. And so it was a very brash way of saying, like, you ought as well just throw yourself into the water and drown, because if you shouldn't be leading people astray. There was this one time in high school where our youth pastor, one of the youth pastors that I worshipped under, he got caught with a DUI, and it came out that he was drinking, he was smoking weed, and he had been doing that while he was a youth pastor, that he was showing up high sometimes. And he came, as soon as he got the DUI, he went to his leadership and he admitted what he did. And then he got in front of the church that week, and I was there for that service, and he told all of us the story, and it was devastating. There are still some people who blame that as the reason why they're not following Jesus, which I have a problem with that too, because like we have our own decisions to make and whatnot, but what I think he did right was getting up and admitting it. And then he went into Alcoholics Anonymous, and he went into rehab, and like he checked himself into rehab. He was not allowed to be part of the church for several months. I got to speak during that time. I was young, but like they asked me to come in and do one message, and I think I helped with worship because he was leading worship and speaking. And he came back after several months away, and they reinstated him, and he had strict accountability, but he came back different, and he's still a follower of Jesus. He I think took a job outside of the church now. He was a pastor for a long time, but he is a faithful follower of Jesus, and he turned his life completely around. And so you look at that and go like, oh, he did the wrong thing. Obviously did the wrong thing. And that I know has stuck with some people because that's the consequence of sin. However, he admitted it. He turned his life around, and he is following Jesus now. So there's a right way to go about it, and there's a wrong way to, of course,
that's
go
right.
about it.
You know, that's if we were disqualified from ministry because we made a mistake or because we sinned, in certain sins I would think would disqualify us for ministry. But that example that you gave, he did several things. He admitted it. He admitted it publicly. He went and got the rehab, and then he came back and he had strict accountability. And I think that church did it right. You know, because you don't just cast somebody aside because they make a mistake or commit a sin, but it would have to be dependent on the sin. You know, like when I was pastor of New Life, if I stole $1 million, right, pretty hard to do.
Yeah,
you know,
where are you getting that? Yeah.
We have $100.
Sure,
you
yeah.
know, it doesn't matter the amount. That might be a reason for never being able to be in charge again.
Yeah.
So we have to take it on a case-by-case basis. But, you know, Jesus forgave the person who denied him and the person who said he never even knew him. He would have I believe he would have reinstated Judas if he would have come back to him, but he didn't.
Yeah.
And Peter, he let him still have a very strong position in the church.
Yes, yeah.
But Peter did pretty much what your friend did.
Yeah.
You know, he admitted it. He came back and he had the thing I wish what I could do is he stood in front of Jesus, and he was reinstated by Jesus. Yeah. And after that, I remember when I was a teenager, there was a show on the Hallmark show called Peter and Paul. And Paul and Peter meet, and Peter doesn't believe that Paul has changed.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And so he says, you know, how am I supposed to trust you? And he goes, well, I would no sooner deny Jesus than you would, Peter.
Yeah.
And Peter goes off by himself.
Yeah.
And because Paul didn't know about Peter's,
okay. Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then he went, and then he realized he has to allow Paul to come into the church just as Jesus let him come back in. Yeah. And that was the coolest. I mean, I still remember it. It was when I was a teenager. That line, I would no sooner deny Jesus than you would. And Peter denied Jesus.
Yep.
And so as we can learn from sin, it's not the preferable way to learn, but we can learn from it. It's better to learn from doing good. Yep. And that's really what we do with the sin of our lives says whether we can be a leader or not. Yeah. Really. Because we're ultimately in submission to Jesus.
Yep.
And certainly he has died and shed blood, the sweat of his brow turned to blood for the sin that we commit. So we shouldn't take it very lightly. We should take it seriously. But as we go about the process of deciding what, and leadership should decide, you know, what punishment should a person have, and even punishment isn't the right word. Discipline is the right word. Discipline to form you back like Jesus. Yeah. The disciples became like Jesus. Discipline makes you like Jesus. Yes. And even in our sin, we can show submission to him by how we treat that person. Yeah. But this all started when you were saying a priest molested children. that should, in my opinion, that's a penalty. There should be a penalty for that. You should never be able to minister again.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah,
You know,
and that's a millstone talk right
yeah,
there.
yeah. And so the bottom line, when we are talking about submission, the world has a way of understanding leadership. In fact, when I was first in the ministry, I was an assistant pastor, and I wanted to make some changes. And I was telling my friend about it, who was a lead pastor of another church, and he said, "You don't have enough feathers." I said, "What?" And he said, you're brave. You have like one or two feathers.
Okay.
The senior pastor has all the feathers. Well, that's a worldly way of thinking of things, because the guy that has all the feathers, that should be the guy that's serving the most.
Yes.
But in the church, if I get the position of lead pastor, that's lead servant, really.
Yep.
And so if I have that attitude, I think I will be a good leader.
Yes.
And if I don't have that attitude, if I have the worldly attitude, I have all the feathers, and I can decide what to do, then where's the submission in that? There's no submission to anybody. You're asking people to submit to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's so serious for us when people abuse that ability, because we're meant to serve the people. And that's why, I didn't want to be too flippant with that when you brought up the priest and I brought up the millstone. I don't actually want that person drowned, but I do want them out of ministry, because there's no way you can serve people in that same capacity again, or you could be trusted in that, because our calling is to serve. And as you're talking, one of the things that comes to mind, when I was in my master's program, I was getting mentored by Pastor Barry, and he gave me this great illustration that has stuck with me. And I was walking through at the beginning of my master's program. I didn't know I'd be lead pastor for sure. God had told me, but I still wasn't sure exactly what was going to happen. And then there was one point where Pastor Barry drew a pyramid on his whiteboard, and he said a lot of leaders think, just like you're talking about with all the feathers, they think that they climb to the top, and they're at the top, and everyone gets to serve them, and you get to do all this freedom because you're at the top of the pyramid. But he said, in the Christian realm, it's like we're at the bottom. And so he flipped over, he erased it and drew it upside down and put the leader at the bottom and said, because you get to serve everyone of the church. And that's how we're meant to look at it. And thankfully at New Life, we don't have to do that by ourselves. We get it. We have a team. We work alongside each other. We're not by ourselves. There's a lot of churches that we have good friends that are the only staff member at that church, and it's like they're serving everyone by themselves. And I get how exhausting that can be. And there's pitfalls in there too. We get to do this together, but that is the Jesus way of doing it. He knelt down and washed his disciples' feet because he is the servant, in mutual submission, the way that we serve each other. And in many places, it wouldn't make any sense for you to say that you are my pastor and now I'm your pastor. It wouldn't make any sense, but because we are in mutual submission, it's like, oh yeah, sure. We do annual reviews around here for all of our staff members. So your supervisor reviews you. One of the things that I learned right when I was walking into this job is that Pastor Chris reviewed Pastor Barry because he oversees the executive pastor, but Pastor Barry reviews Pastor Chris because we want accountability and because there is a mutual submission there. And so Pastor Barry and I just did our annual reviews, and I reviewed him and he reviewed me. And I know that there's been friends outside of the church that have gone like, oh, that doesn't make sense. And it's like, well, maybe not from a worldly standpoint, but I want someone to be serving me in that way, because it is serving me in that way, and I want to serve them too. And so we understand that there's some mutual submission in leadership, but there's also this reality, and another one of the reasons why it's so serious is because we are called to submit to our leaders. There's a call that we are to bring honor and respect to those that God puts in position above us, and that brings negative feelings. We've talked about that all throughout this mini series here, but there is a reality, and John Bevere has great books on that. He's a pastor that talks a lot about how we are to honor those that God puts in leadership, and we can do that in healthy ways. Like, it's not just a yes sir, I'll do whatever you say, but there's ways to bring honor and respect that bring life to a church, and we've seen that in good ways.
Right. One thing I would say is, some people think submitting to the leader means you always have to say yes and do what he says. And there's a caveat to that, because if the leader says to do something that's contrary to the will of Jesus, you always have a greater submission to Jesus than to, and actually that's why there's a lead pastor, because somebody has to have the responsibility for the whole church in legal terms and in everything. But as long as that lead pastor understands he's under submission to Jesus, and he's mutually submissive, like you said, the best example I know is Barry would evaluate me, and now he's evaluating you, and a lot of people go, wait a minute, on your org chart, he's, you're here and he's here. No, I'm on my org chart, I'm here and he's there.
Oh, we flip it upside down. You
know, and so therefore it makes perfect sense. But I think the real thing is the heart of a leader is either to serve others or to be served. You think about it. The leader who wants to be served, he says what his title is. He always makes sure that they know he's in charge. Whenever anybody talks, he has to talk because he has to have the last word. And that kind of leader, it's I heard it said yesterday. I was talking to somebody, and I love this. He said, a lead pastor has to lead in vision and direction, but the lead pastor leans on the staff. And I thought, when I was here, that was like whenever you were the youth pastor, I didn't try to tell you how to do the youth thing. And really, anybody who has charge of a certain area of ministry, I would have some ideas, but I would come say, hey, what do you ever think about doing this? And if you said no, okay. I didn't push it. I didn't try to make my will the will of everybody. And also we might have a conversation. Well, then why not? And you say, well, okay, this is what I think. Oh, okay. And then I would agree with you. And really, if I can't remember of a time when I came to you when you were a youth pastor and told you have to do something.
No, I can't think of that either.
And that's what it's. I felt there was a collegiality of ministry. I was a lead pastor, and really, I didn't exercise that a lot because I had a lot of people that had gifts that I didn't have, and had a passion for ministry that I didn't have, or even if I did have, I was started out as youth pastor, and I had a passion for youth. But you were doing a good job, so my job is to encourage you and give you the resources you need to do it. And now you're doing the same for Matt. And you did that really well. And when I was the youth pastor, one of the things that I had engaged with is honoring and respecting you, which is an easy thing. But there was this season where I was starting to feel that God was calling me to lead more in the church than youth ministry. Although youth ministry, I've always looked at it as like a mini church. I mean, we have 135 people that are there every single week. And many churches in America would love that. And so I remember going to a mentor. His name is Ryan Paskey. He's now the campus pastor at the Wexford branch of Northway, and we would meet for sushi. And I told him, I was like, man, I feel like I don't have as much sway in the church as I would like to. Like I can't influence the organization. At the time, I wasn't on our lead team, which is a big decision-making team we have. And I said, but I want to. Like, I feel God's given me the ability to, and I don't know how to do that. And he said, okay, well, why don't you lead from your position? I said, well, how do I do that? And he said, well, you honor and respect the leader. And if you have an idea, come to the leader, to Pastor Chris or Pastor Barry or Pastor Mark or Pastor Brad, whoever it was that I was coming to, that I was serving. And he said, bring that idea and bring it with not an assumption that they're going to take it because you're right, but that they would hear it. And so I would. And then he said, and if they take it, rejoice in that and help them out with it. And if they don't take it, honor and respect the fact that they're in charge and you're not. And it was a good word of, okay, how do I bring ideas and know that I'm not in charge, and so my saying doesn't go, but if they take it, that's good. And sometimes you guys would take it, sometimes you wouldn't. And then he told me, when they have ideas, honor and respect them so much to celebrate them and to work them out the best you can. And he said, if you do those two things,
you'll grow in the organization and you'll gain their respect and you'll gain more leadership. And then I read a book later on called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge by Clay Scroggins. And he was a youth pastor that eventually became a lead pastor. And he talked about the same thing. Like, you honor and respect, and you give the respect to whoever God put in charge. And you know that there's a reason that God put them in charge. And it goes back to what we read about in the 3 Kings book of David knew that there was an anointing that was given to Saul. And even though Saul was going a little crazy, he said, I'm going to respect God's anointing, even if this guy is not listening to it. And the book does a good job of walking through. There's going to be times where your leader is obviously doing things that doesn't seem like they're aligned with God's will. And what you said is exactly what 3 Kings says. You have to honor God first. And I would even go to the extent of saying to honor your leader is to disobey them in that moment, because what they're telling you to do, if it's against God's will, actually is worse for them. And so you're honoring them. Same thing if you're a parent. Like, we're called to honor our mother and father, but if our mother or father are telling us to do things against God's will, it is really more honoring to their eternal being to listen to God instead. And so there is a word, though, in the Three Kings, the Tale of 3 Kings, that talks about if you find yourself in that situation, you have a boss. Maybe it's in the workplace, or maybe it is as a pastor that you're underneath in a church, and they are obviously more like a Saul. They're not, maybe they were called to do the role, but they're not being faithful. His suggestion was to leave quietly. And I thought that was a really cool suggestion.
You know, when I was a Presbyterian pastor, we had one of my ordination vows was to further the peace, purity, and unity of the church. The peace, purity, and unity of the church. And when in 2001, when the denomination decided to go a direction that I thought was not according to the Bible, I couldn't further all 3 because the purity was being questioned, and the peace, I was not prone to peace in that situation, and unity, how could I be union with something that's not biblical? So you have, you can fight, but I felt I felt like I was supposed to peacefully withdraw. And that furthered the peace, purity, and unity of church, because New Life was the result. And whenever I started New Life, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to find a government system that reflected the Bible. And, you can find Episcopal systems with the bishop in charge in the Bible. You can certainly find elders charge in the Bible. You can't find congregational. You can't find a congregational model. But there's freedom within limits. But Jesus is always ultimately in charge, whatever it is. And his word, the Bible, is always our only guide for daily practice. So if you start there, you have to not do certain things and do certain things. And that's where you have people come to become a member of church. And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. But really, if the person that comes to New Life and wants to be a member wants to do the things that what we're preaching from the pulpit, what we're doing in our small groups, what we're trying to, to share, grow, and live the new life of Jesus Christ with the world, one person at a time. And if you want to do that, if you want to help do that, then you can come on board. And that's always going to guide us. And the thing is, you have to have something you submit to. And it's either going to be Jesus, or who else would you submit to if you didn't submit to Jesus? Ultimately is the devil. And you're ultimately going to submit to the Bible, or else you're going to submit to deception. And all you always are looking for, who am I submitting to? When I submit to you right now, as you're the lead pastor of New Life, I'm submitting to you as you're following Jesus. Paul even said that, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And I think you're doing a good job of imitating Jesus. And, the recent series that we just finished, those models, those discipleship activities or the disciplines that we have, you reflect all of them. You know, we said you can't expect to get mastered of one week, and then the second week, and third, in 9 weeks you have them all mastered. Yeah. But you haven't been just doing it for 9 weeks. Yeah. You've been doing it for a long time. Since you were a teenager, you started, and so that's one thing that I sort of can't understand. Well, I can understand because I was a teenager once, but. You know, I think it was Mark Twain said, when I was 18, my father was the stupidest man in the world. When I was 21, I was amazed how much he had learned in those 3 years. Yeah. You know, and I think we all look at old people and we say, oh, they're not what they used to be. But in their way of understanding things, if they've been growing using the spiritual life. If you're somebody that's a spiritual adult and a spiritual parent, and you have somebody that's a spiritual child, that spiritual child would do well to watch and listen. And that's a way of submission. But even as a spiritual parent, there's a time when a child will do something or say something, and I can learn from it. You always can learn, but it's more often possible to look up let's go this way. Look at this end of the spiritual growth decision continuum, and you can find more things to emulate than you can at the spiritual baby.
Yes.
And so I think that in itself, you know, there's so many proverbs that say about gray hair. Yeah. You know, I thought about that. Why is gray hair such a big thing? Well, in those days, if you got gray hair, that meant you lived a wise life.
That's true. Yeah. You're still alive.
You're still alive, you know. And really it's true today too, because some people do stupid things. You know, I say everybody does stupid things. And the ones with gray hair have not done any fatal stupid things.
Yes.
But they do. People do stupid things.
It's true.
And so you don't want to emulate that. You want to emulate the person who has. Let's put it this way: the older I am, the less stupid things I continue to do. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And the more I become like Jesus. And especially as I'm intentionally developing that process. And the other thing, we started off by saying, you know, here's a terrible example of leadership. But we didn't say, I'm trying to become an example of leadership that people can follow. If you do what I do, it should look like Jesus.
Yeah.
And not always, but more than when I was 25, more than I was 45, and actually more than when I was 65.
Yeah.
Because I'm shaped more and more and more towards Him, and less and less by the ways of the world.
Yeah.
And I have a few people that are older than me that I still emulate. I still submit to their leadership in my life. They can tell me what I'm doing wrong, and whatever they tell me, I'll act on it.
Yeah.
You know, Andy Wygant and Arthur Pace are two people that come to mind. If they tell me I'm doing something wrong, I listen.
Yeah, you honor and you respect. Their wisdom, and we could do that. And we can do that with our church leaders. We can do that with our bosses. And when people do things against God's will, we can walk away peacefully. And best thing to do is go talk to them about it. Like, I mean, when I make mistakes, when you make mistakes, and people in the church family have come up and said, hey, you've made this mistake, I'm never mad about that. I want to learn about that. And so we could do the same thing. And I'd encourage you as well to be praying for the leadership of this church, not just myself and Pastor Chris, but the whole leadership team. Pray for your boss too, wherever you work. Pray for that they'll gain wisdom from God. If they don't know Jesus, that they'd come to know Jesus. If they do know Jesus, they'd grow to be like Him. And by praying for someone, your heart always becomes more and more tender towards them, because you just have more of a passion as God gives it to you. And so I'd encourage you, please be praying for us. We need the prayer. We fight those battles, and the more battles we fight against temptation, against the enemy, the closer we get to Jesus. But there are battles that I know that we fight today, that there will be battles ahead. And so we'd really love your prayers. So thank you so much for engaging in this. Submission, I know, is not the most fun thing that we can engage in. However, it's so important if we're going to become like Jesus. So thank you for watching, listening. Next week, we're going to continue this. We're going to go through different spiritual disciplines. So when I say continue this, I'm going to continue journeying alongside you with the different disciplines we talked about in that series called The Journey. And we're going to talk about prayer. And I'm just going to go a little bit more about my personal prayer life, what I've seen, the highs, the lows, to help if you have any questions about prayer, please encourage you to check that out and listen to that next week. But thank you, Pastor Chris. Thank you for being with us once more, and we will see you soon.